Hi, I'm Krista Campbell. Welcome to the webinar. Better Business, Mobile Technology Provides Solutions and Insights. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted in the water utilities space on GeoNet. You will receive a follow-up email that includes a link to this location, so it makes it easy for you to find. It can take a few days to publish online, so expect it to be available towards the end of next week. The webinar format today is a little different than what you're used to if you've attended water webinars in the past. We're going to have two Q&A sessions. Halfway through, we're going to stop and take some questions. Be sure to get your questions entered if you have them concerning the content at the beginning of the webinar. And then we're going to have a second Q&A session at the end. So again, please post your questions as they come up, get them into the questions dialog box, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. The webinar also is going to include several polling questions. Please participate in the polls. Tom and I will greatly appreciate your responses. Another change for today is that I'm not going to be presenting. There's a lot of great content coming from St. Johns County Utilities, so decided that they will have the full hour to share their story, show you what they've been up to, maybe a demonstration. I hope you're excited. I know I am. So let's welcome Tom Tibbetts to the webinar. Tom is a licensed surveyor and GIS professional. He is the Information Systems Manager at St. Johns County Utilities. Tom has provided local governments with professional GIS solutions for 25 years in various positions. He is active in the community as a volunteer, contributing to the GIS profession whenever there is an opportunity. Tom has spent the last 7 years using his expertise to support water utilities at St. Johns County. Tom, welcome to the webinar.
Great. Well, thank you, Krista. And yes, we do want to see everyone jump in there with some of the surveys and questions. We really want to have a nice dialogue. St. Johns County Utilities is a utility that's had to adapt a lot, which we'll introduce. But what we want to present today is some of the business practices that we put in the last few years. We really want to touch on asset management systems, GIS, mobile, and we've even gotten into insights and analytics. So we're excited to have this today, and we look forward to hearing from everyone. Okay. So St. Johns County Utilities is a medium to small size utility. We're located in the northeast coastal Florida, and we serve about 120,000 residents for water and sewer services. GIS and information technology has really kicked in and helped the utility the last 5 to 10 years, and a lot of that is because we have some pretty good challenges. For starters, we're one of the fastest growing counties in the country by rate, and so our utility grows somewhere between 6 and 7% per year, which is a hard thing to keep up with. So we have that high growth, but it's also expanding into areas. So we're having to build a lot of infrastructure to handle that high growth. At the same time, we're a coastal utility, so we have aging infrastructure. We kind of say we have some of the oldest homes and the newest homes in the country because we're home to St. Augustine, Florida, which is one of the nation's oldest cities. So between the high growth and the old cities, we have a lot to challenge. We also have our typical emergencies, plus we add hurricanes to that. We were impacted by 2 hurricanes that really challenged the utility, and we came out shining. The utility itself will grow and will double in size in the next 15 to 20 years through growth. At the same time, we have all smaller utilities that are going to be consolidated for efficiency. Additionally, Florida has water resources that limit it, so we have environmental regulation that forces reuse. So a lot of these are challenges, and the utility itself has about 12 divisions that work together in order to solve those while remaining loyal to our key foundations of customer service, environmental stewardship, and financial strength. And so a utility of 47,000 accounts, 45,000 accounts, serving 120,000 people is filled with this infrastructure. I think if you look at the map on the right, the areas in dark brown are where our utility services are, and you can see right off the bat that we are impacted by the coastal region and the inland rivers, but we're also impacted by being very dispersed. Consolidating smaller utilities has really spread us out. And while we have those, while that's the size of our utility, we have almost 400 pump stations and almost 20 treatment plants in order to operate for that. So there are challenges in itself. Today, actually right now, we're doing a ribbon cutting. So in the northeast section of our county, we're opening up a $32 million water reclamation facility that will consolidate 3 older treatment plants in the area. And so it's a big day for the utility, especially because it was only 3 years ago that we opened up our previous treatment plant in the northwest section of the county. And so what I'd like to do is turn it back over to Krista, who's executing a poll. We just want to know who everybody is that's attending. So if you'll look for your poll.
Yep, we've got the poll up. We just want to know, what is your area of expertise? Maybe you don't think you're an expert, but maybe you're getting there. So please select all that apply. This can be multiple choice. So if you support water and wastewater or water and stormwater, choose whichever ones are applicable to your expertise and experience. Okay, Tom, it looks like we have 83% water, 52% wastewater, 28% stormwater, and 14% reuse. Thank you, everyone, for voting. If you haven't voted, I'll give you just another second. It looks like a lot of you are voting, so we really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll, and it'll get back to you, Tom.
Great. So thanks, audience. It's always nice to know what's going on, who's there, and how they're involved. And it's nice to know. A lot of this will play into all of those, but again, everybody has their important factors of what they have to respond to. Let's get over to this screen. There we go. So the St. Johns County started a digital transformation. We've been using GIS for many years, but now we had a large variety of applications that really came to help us. And GIS has always been a core function of the county with its growth rate. And so as you can see in the pictures here, we have a hurricane, we created our dashboards, but essentially we run our GIS system, our asset management system, we utilize vehicle tracking, we utilize SCADA, we utilize mobile GIS, and so the tough book in the bottom left-hand corner has almost been fully replaced by the iPads in the field. There's one division still utilizing the tough books for the serial port. And this past year, we've even jumped up. So the iPad for the field, well, in the conference rooms, we have the smart boards, and I feel like that really changes how the utility does its workshops and makes decisions within the building. So we are becoming fully mobile, getting away from the desktop and putting the information everywhere it's needed. And that digital transformation is built upon our GIS transformation. And so we have for years developed a strong geodatabase to store all of our utility infrastructure as we've grown. We link it back to all of our important documents. And our field crews for the past 10 years have been using tablets or laptops in order to utilize that from the field, along with at the treatment plants. Any mobile device that we get nowadays, whether a smartphone or an iPad, is given an online GIS or a portal account in order to see everything. I have not seen a paper system map in the 7 years I've been at the utility. They're all on their devices. And so we're pretty proud of how we have to do that, but we have to do that because if you recall how dispersed the county is, there's very little room for moving back and forth to gather paper information. I mean, we couldn't keep up with it anyway. So in order to meet our requirements, in order to operate, we had to make these adjustments. And mobile GIS was an interesting one because I wasn't sure where that would sit on top of our asset management system and our desktop GIS system. And I was overwhelmingly pleased at how quickly this found its purpose within the county. We have dozens of online maps available some available to the public, most available just to our staff. And these have really helped streamline how people do things. We have of course, our system map and our data collectors, and we have our information, our document viewers. We also have several services that work for our customers to really enhance that customer service and reach a wider audience with a simple application. So mobile GIS is extremely important in how we operate our GIS and the utility. about 11 years ago, the county started moving towards an asset management system in order to handle its preventative maintenance scheduling and really have a preventative maintenance program, and also be able to have a quick response time for reactive repairs. And so we are a strong user of the CityWorks asset management system, which is built on top of GIS, and we utilize that in all of our divisions. As you can see there, metering is slightly separate, but we see our lift stations, lines, environmental and compliance, warehouse, SCADA, engineering. Pretty much across the board, this is an enterprise-wide system that's used with about 100 accounts of our 180 employees. And so our work orders are stored, all of our maintenance tasks store our work orders. Each work order tracks labor, equipment, and material from a cost standpoint, and then all the material is stored using a storeroom module that helps us report that for compliance and show where all of our money is spent each month. We use service requests for our customer calls, and then we report all this up for our management. And in the past few years, we've added conditions assessments through inspections, risk assessments through operation insights, and we track a lot of our engineering projects for all that growth. As you can see, it's tied straight into GIS, so it's seamless in use. And about 4 years ago, we had to really make the turn on that asset management system. We didn't want to do just preventative maintenance and repairs. We really needed to get into our criticality and risk, which would be our probability of failure, consequence of failure. From that, do our field assessments and our condition assessments through inspections. And from that, as you can see, we're around the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock part of this cycle. After we do our field assessments, we need to do our renewals, replacements, or retiring through our capital improvement project program. And so we develop that, we design it, and we build it, and then we go all the way back to 12 o'clock and start the cycle again. The utility has current value of $1 billion worth of assets from original construction costs, so we have a large responsibility for continuing to maintain that to stay ahead of it. And so I think this is a good point where I can hear from you. I'd love to know what my audience is doing or using for their asset management systems.
So here's your next poll. Are you using a CMMS that is integrated with your GIS? Yes or no? It's a quick poll. All right, looks like everyone's starting to answer. We're going to give you a few seconds for this one. I know we have quite a few people on the webinar. Are you using a CMMS that is integrated with your GIS? All right, Tom, it looks like a majority of the responses are saying they're not using a CMMS with their GIS. We do have about 26% saying that they do. We have a few people left that haven't voted. If you could just take a second to respond to the poll, we would appreciate it. All right, it looks like it's standing steady at about 75% no and 25% yes. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. And so certainly we're going to see how our system operates. You know, we all have utility infrastructure that we have to maintain, and so how we do it and what fits into our business workflows becomes interesting. Here at St. Johns County, it's very seamless. We're very on board with GIS for the last 20 to 30 years. And so this was a natural fit for us. And so I'd like to continue on with that and certainly welcome any questions for people who want some further information. So what I'd like to do with that transformation, again, we had the technology, the digital, we had the GIS, and we had the asset management transformations. I have a little story here about manholes that really tells the value of that. And I know manholes aren't the top of our list as far as assets. They're pretty straightforward, messy, and kind of boring. The lids are kind of fun, but everything else is not exciting. They're not exciting as pumps and stuff like that. But we had to start rehabbing our manholes. A manhole's lifespan will be anywhere from 25 years to 75 years, based on its location, proximity to a force main or a pump station, and its material. And so it's an important deal. Now, rehabbing a manhole, and everyone can help me as they calculate for this, I want to show you how important this suddenly becomes to your utility. We have 9,700 manholes. So for my ease of brain power, I'm going to say we have 10,000 manholes. And so what I'd like you to do is just think about how many manholes you have. For us, we have 10,000 manholes, and rehabbing a manhole will cost just under $4,000. And so we know that over the lifespan of our 10,000 manholes, they will need to be rehabbed, and we will have to spend about $4,000. So we know over the lifespan of all of our manholes, we're going to spend $40 million on rehabs. And that's 10,000 projects. So it's very difficult to track and manage. And that requires an inspection, it requires the rehab, and then close out. Now, if you don't rehab your manholes, you have to rebuild them. And rebuilding a manhole is 6 times that. So instead of $40 million, you can spend upwards of $240 million for that. So while the simple little old manhole out in the street is there, from a project management standpoint and from your finances, it's very important in how you manage all that. So what I want to do is walk through this one, because this one allowed us to really connect the process to rehab them. And we went from rehabbing 100 manholes, we went from rehabbing 10 manholes a year to well over 100 manholes a year, just by putting it within the GIS and Cityworks process. So our first step is to figure out the probability of failure. So we developed, and as you can see, we have an asset strategy that looks at the probability that it will fail and the consequence that it will fail, and then what operational strategies we can have around that. So we call this a risk assessment or a criticality assessment. And so for us, we looked at the age of the manhole, we looked at the material of the manhole. We also looked at its proximity to a pump, which can cause gases that it'll dissolve, or proximity to a force main. We were able to utilize our systems in-house to build this model and run these to probability of failures. And so we look at on the probability of failure, and this is very typical within the utility industry. So these are usually being done by most utilities. We looked at the date that it was installed, the date it was rehabbed, proximity from a downstream lift station and its gases, the number of pipes that connect to it can impact it, the proximity from an upstream pressurized force main, and the length of the upstream mains. And that really gave us a model for calculating the risk of the failure. Well, we also went for consequence of failures. If it did fail, what would be the cause? And by looking at the flow and the number of customers and the proximity of water bodies within our GIS layers, we were able to calculate that consequence of failure. And we are also able to look at our maintenance strategy. If it required a lot of maintenance in the past, or if it's constantly being clogged, we would increase its scoring. And then within Cityworks, we're able to hit our geodatabase and our ArcGIS services in order to do this, and then analyze them lightly in this model. We can also save it straight to the GIS, so we have all of these values are in our GIS layer. And we were able to then look at the probability of failure of the manholes. Well, if we have 10,000 manholes, we were looking for the 1,500 that were most probable to fail. The 1,500 that were most probable to fail over the next 4 years, we scheduled inspections for those where the crews will go out and inspect them. And we set those straight up into our Cityworks, our asset management system. And what's neat about that is they're actually updating GIS attributes for the manholes that we cannot pull from the as-built. So there's about 24 features in the manholes that the field inspectors have an opportunity to update. And with this inspection, as they identify the failing, what's failing and what's not, where the defects are, we gave it an automatic score. So not only do we have a risk score, but we also have a condition score. And so if we inspect 250 manholes, we can take the 50 worst scored manholes and assign those to our crews to review the inspection, review the photographs, review the defects, And if they're in agreement, we schedule those for a rehabilitation. So we quickly went from 10,000 to 1,500 to 250 to 50. And those 50 get rehabbed. And our crews, our engineering project and this whole process involves getting your finance, your administration, your operations crews, and your engineering division and project managers, along with the GIS and asset management people, to work together on multiple tasks. So this is really efficient within an online system, a mobile system. You know, we take our rehabilitations and we put them in an online map so we don't spend as much time. Our contractors can simply go to the online map from their phone, zoom in on details, they can share it with their office, they can share it with their subcontractors, and they can see where all 50 rehabs are and what the details are instead of creating paper maps back in the office that get shared and are static. And so we're really proud of this. We also like the after results. If we are charging our customers for rehabs, or if we did a rate change, we utilize the online maps so the customers understand where their money went and that we are investing back into their sewer system, so it'll be available for the next 100 years. And so that is the asset management cycle to a T, where we build it, preventative maintenance, reactive repairs, and then we do a risk assessment, a field inspection, and then rehabs. And for us, those little old manholes that are $40 to $240 million worth of infrastructure repairs, we also are able to tie, again, our administration, our financial budget people, our engineers, our operational managers, our operational technicians, and our asset people. And so there are two prongs to this. One was the GIS analysis, the other one is the asset management. And so I thought this was a good time to stop, meet some of the people that are on the call, on the webinar, and see what kind of questions you have.
Thanks, Tom. We do have some questions coming in. For those of you that have not entered your question yet, please use the questions dialog box. We're going to spend a few minutes going over several that have already come in. To get started, there are some questions around your criticality analysis. Do you use modeling software to help with this? What kind of output or reporting do you get from that analysis?
So our models originally were built within Python scripts and geodatabases. However, we were able to migrate that to a new product from Cityworks. So Cityworks provides an operational insights, and that allows us to run our probability of failure and consequence of failure. And you saw some slides on that, which showed some of the factors and how that looks inside Cityworks.
Thanks. Another question we have is concerning your manhole inspections and your CCTV software. Do you have anything integrated with that? What do you use for CCTV?
It's a great question. And so for the manhole inspections, we developed custom inspection forms. And again, while we could have used online GIS, we wanted everything to tie into our asset management system. So we handed our contractors iPads and they VPN in and access our system. And then we set up the inspection form to match the NASCO MACP inspection standards. For CCTV, we are tracking cured in-place projects. However, most of our analysis on the risk identified our clay pipes, our 1% clay pipes as the most at risk. So we're not taking as advanced an approach to that because that one's sort of the low-hanging fruit. We know those have to be CCTV'd and then lined. And so we don't have to do as many miles of inspections. We don't have to track as much. Well, although we are paying attention, because once we get through our first round of the clay pipes, then we'll have more challenges in how we manage that project. But a great question, and one that many other agencies have to do.
Thanks, Tom. You mentioned a lot of your staff having access to the maps. This is a little bit of a two-part question. First, what does the licensing look like to allow everyone to have access to maps? And then secondly, your field crew, do they have to use a VPN to get access to Portal? What is their workflow like?
That's a good question. So the first one is we do have everything internally installed, and so when we went to mobile GIS with ArcGIS Online, we originally published it through our own servers and a web adapter out to ArcGIS Online. We're pulling a lot of our staff tools back into Portal now that we have Portal. Our licensing is Esri's small utility and ELA and enterprise license agreement. And so that includes that. And then Portal, all view accounts you have unlimited view accounts. And so it's really just how many standard accounts you get, which we get about, well, I'll let you answer that one, Chris. That's Esri's small utility ELA. But that covers most of our staff. We pick up a few additional licenses on top of that for our editors. We actually share, we give view accounts to our contractors so that we don't have to spend a lot of time sending them data and paying them to rebuild our data on their system. So our contractors have there's cost savings all over on that. Our system is set up based on a model that's over 10 years old, or about 10 years old. So our servers are internal, and therefore our field crews, when they're out in the field, need to VPN in from basically a commercial data plan. If they're near a building, then they can access our internal wireless networks. We will, with our next server redesign, we'll look at making that more accessible by how we place our servers, because we want to make it seamless for the end user.
I know that was a long question, but good job.
Okay.
And another question, which I've heard this one before, and maybe you have as well. We have Nicholas asking, what about assets that might not be associated with location? And he's specifically asking about electrical or SCADA. Do you have assets that aren't related to location that are also part of this GIS system or CMMS system that you're using?
It's a good question. We manage our trucks, but I would call that more equipment as just a truck in CityWorks. We don't have electrical, although we do actually have electrical at our plants. We don't provide electrical in the field. And then SCADA is one that's evolving. We use a footprint, and this was again built 7 to 10 years ago. So we use a footprint for our facilities, and then we use related tables. And so most of it is fairly stationary, although a pump can get pulled and put somewhere else. And so it's having a good process to track that. And then, yeah, that's a good question. Not as critical for us, although, again, if we were designing it from scratch today, we might have to address that one.
Yeah, I've heard it come up before as well. Let's go back. Our bigger challenge is tracking assets that aren't ours, that are attached to our system, such as grease traps, backflow preventers, and private lines and private pump stations. If we change the pressure on our system and a school has a lift station connected to our system, we have to make sure that their pump station can match that pressure. So there's always good challenges. Never boring, right?
Right.
Okay, let's go back to your use of ArcGIS and Cityworks. We have a few questions about how are they connected? Do you have to do a data exchange? I'm going to jump in just for a second and clarify that ArcGIS is an Esri software. Cityworks is an Azteca software. They're business partners of ours, so they are two separate software pieces. But Cityworks was built on top of ArcGIS technology. Tom, I'm going to let you take it from there as far as the data exchange and how you experience it on a daily basis.
Yeah, Cityworks, Esri has several business partners that are asset management system providers. Cityworks is one of those. However, they're the one we use. Cityworks is built entirely, utilizes web services from Esri and edits directly to the Geo database. And so there are not two databases. There is technically a database to track maintenance tasks and features that are part of the asset records. I'm sorry, not the asset, but the maintenance records. but there's no transferring. You're not going from one system to the other. It's built on top of it. So if our Esri system goes down, our system, I guess that wasn't a good example, but it's built on it. So one database, one source, seamless integration.
Thanks, Tom. We're going to take a couple of short and easy questions, and then we'll get back to your presentation. How many staff do you have dedicated to doing asset management?
Technically, within my division, there's 4, including myself, but my division handles some other capital projects for information systems that aren't GIS and asset management. So roughly 4-ish. We do have 4 continuing service provider contractors that help us through professional services that have been very helpful in a lot of our new development and implementation, along with our support. So I think it's just having a good relationship and that build and continue to provide services.
Okay, and then last one, what type of tablets do you use in the field?
We are iPad. Crews love full-size iPads. So iPhone, iPads, iPhones. We've done Androids in the past. Works very well. We don't do anything ruggedized. We tell them not to drop them in so far. That's done well. The tough folks are awesome, although they rarely leave the truck or the desk. The iPads are getting carried around, so they're just more seamless in how they get used.
Great, thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoyed the Q&A. We're going to get back to Tom's presentation, and we'll have more questions at the end.
So thank you, and thanks for those questions. And we're going to jump into more of the GIS side of this, of what we're doing with this information. We have these entire systems that are built, and how are we using them? And it's not in the slide, but it pulls into that common patterns of use, which we'll pull up in a second. But for us, it became important to make business decisions with all of this data that was there. And so we became one of the earlier users of Esri's Insights for ArcGIS. And I have a demo that does this, but I'll show you how we look at the manhole lifespans and the criticality. So that walkthrough that I just did, we're going to show you how Insights was helped to make those decisions. What impacts the lifespan? Where do we prioritize inspections? And how do we do our inspections? Do we sweep a neighborhood, or do we do leapfrogging or smart selection? We also used Insights on the tail end of that. So again, we streamlined this entire process to make it the most efficient we could. And we used Insights to help decide where we select our manhole rehabs and budgeting. For us, it was a matter of weighing our personal opinions of hurricane impacted areas, an area of a utility that we had that consolidated that had aging infrastructure, and where were the real risk scores as opposed to our interpretation. And so for me, we get away from my office, and at the Esri conference, I was able to develop some of these and really clean them up. This is the mobile transformation. My desktop, my desk with everything on it goes with me wherever that little tablet computer goes. I guess it's a laptop. And so that was just pretty neat. But the geodebase changed what we know, and then we went to desktop server and mobile GIS to change who has access and from where. But our asset management system changes how we work and how we manage our labor, equipment, and costs. People and money are huge, important factors in our business world. And Insights is changing how we use our information and how we make decisions. And so for us, Insights was a natural fit. We needed to increase operational awareness and management. We needed to establish objectives and measure effectiveness, and we wanted to integrate. We have a lot of information systems that we want to pull data from. And so this is an area where we're slowly making a transformation. We had a great out-of-the-gate start and continue to build on that. But we want to improve how the utility operates, and that's really the core of how we make decisions, where we make decisions, and when we make decisions. Another example is our warehouse manager wanted a velocity report to see how frequently material is used. And instead of exporting, 800-page spreadsheet and providing it to them, we simply gave them this analytics, somewhat of a dashboard, but it's more of an analysis tool to click and discover where that's happening. And a similar thing on the maintenance activities at our treatment plant, so we can understand what's being done and by whom. Who does the work, to what assets, and what are the costs. And so we did a really good start with insights. And what we found, I think this is a good one for the audience, that implementing technology has improved from where it was 10 years ago. There are some beefier tools needed for that, like the data store, but it runs a lot seamlessly now. The bigger one for us is we have to build a transition for shifting people to instinctually reach towards the tools. It's hard to try to use a new tool or to not go with something that you've been using for the last 10 to 20 years. And so we want them to do that. So what we're choosing to do is we add stepping stones. Analytics and insights are powerful tools, but we want to put a few more operational dashboards out there so that they can get used to them. And they get used to seeing how things are operating instead of having to use older methods for that. Quick check from their phone on what's going on. We also, I'm sure Crystal will love this, but we feel we need to really jump on the Pro and Portal. We're pushing off of ArcMap because we just see the need for it to being more seamless, and we're ready to make that transition even further. And we want to know where that analysis occurs and provide the information readily there. And that happens in doorways, hallways, senior manager's office, boardrooms. We're turning our meeting rooms into workshop rooms, essentially. And so here's an example of one. It's a dashboard of our customer calls. So if I told you 3 items: environmental stewardship, financial strength, and customer service, so we want to make sure we're being very responsive to each customer call. And while they can log in and see this elsewhere, we wanted our management to see this very quickly, so they're not investing as much time, like I said, a seamless 1 or 2 click access to the data instead of going into a full application, and then summarizing what's important. And we can take a look at that. So what I'm going to do is, let's take a look at a couple of those before we jump into that tail end. And so, since the last one was up there was the dashboard, this is just an operations dashboard within Esri, and we set it to look at our customer calls, so our service requests. And without doing anything, you can see that we have 65 that are in progress. And without doing anything more, you can see this one from February 8th needs to be corrected. So already the dashboard helps us have cleaner data. These first few are incorrect, but once we clean up those records, and this is going into production in January, so I'm allowed to be a little off of my data. We can see our weekly, monthly, and yearly. So far I'm 2 clicks into this. And over here, I set my dates, and so we're doing the date range of, let's do a week's worth. So we'll go, today's the 12th, there's the 5th, down to 42, and if I want to do the 6th, we're down to 37. So these are how many were created since last Friday. And this is really important for management to see that, and they can see when it was created. This is 1:30 a.m., 5:19 a.m. We run a 24/7 call center at our treatment plants, and then during the day, our staff takes over. It even includes the details, and so we can see, there's 2 pump fails within this neighborhood. And so just like that, you can see how a manager, I'm now 6 clicks in, 7 clicks in, and they can see how the utility is operating. And so dashboards were one we kind of skipped and went straight to analytics because we had dashboards elsewhere, but we're really happy to start using these more to help our staff transition to having records. And so the other one I want to get into was analytics. Nope, this is called insights. Sorry, this is Cityworks analytics data published within Esri Insights. And so for us, remember our manhole model? and I told you how a manhole proximity to it. So here we see simple maps. Orange are all our manholes. Blue are the ones that have been rehabbed. By looking at it this way, we can see a simple bell curve, and this is how proximity to a lift station. So a manhole's proximity to a lift station. I think we see most of our manholes are at 3, 4, and 5. And we can see most of our rehabs occur at 3, 4, and 5, but the curves are very different. And so actually manhole 1 is not the highest risk, it's manhole 2 and 3. But what we can also see is if I click on my rehabs, you can see its selection is carrying through, and you can see that our most at-risk manholes from the criticality score are the ones that are within 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 proximity to a lift station. We can also see that those most risk ones are also the oldest ones. And then we can also see those trends within its number of connections, which doesn't play into us critically, or its proximity to a force main. So based on this analysis, we changed our model to add more weighting and scoring to its proximity to a lift station. We're also able to do this with our finance, engineering, and operations people to make sure that we're all on board with that. And so this helped us refine our model and really improve that. So again, we know all our manholes, we look at our rehabs, and we're able to refine our model for identifying risk. So then we say, instead of giving this one a score of 10 when it's near a lift station, we give it a score of 20. Or we can look at the years. So again, Insights is a data discovery, data exploration tool, but it also allows a group to collaboratively review the analysis. Instead of handing someone a finished report that they had to trust, I could walk them through those 4 clicks to show them how that works. Now, a better example of that is now that we have our model, which you can see these maps on the left are identifying the risk scores. So again, we identify risk. From the risk, we prioritize inspections, and then we do what's our biggest risk, which ones have the worst conditions, and then rehab them. And so for us, our crews, these are our manholes, and these are our hot spots on our manholes. And then here's our probability of failure for the top 20%. So we've already gotten rid of 80%. And our crews were pretty intent on rehabbing these manholes right here in this area. And that area, if you zoom in, has a lot down here, but this is the older part of that neighborhood. So their interpretation was the St. Augustine shores was the area to focus 100% of our inspections. And what we did, though, is we showed them by picking these 306 manholes, and even if we wanted to do, and we change the slider if we want, but these 1,500 manholes, we can show them that there was significant risk. You know, yes, they were correct. There wasn't as much risk elsewhere in the county, but there was risk in this coastal island area. And so, especially if we identified this, we identified where that risk was. So we were able to encourage them to divert 1/3 of the funding for inspections and put it over here, and we were able to avoid inspections in the southern part of this St. Augustine shores. So already we're using it to make better decisions which save the utility money. And that's just through Insights. And again, we do this right in front of them so that there's an ability to see this. Now, if you'll remember the last piece of analysis, we have all these manholes within here. And what we said to them is, we're finding that if it's near a pump station, it's highest risk. So instead of inspecting all of the manholes within this neighborhood, let's work, instead of groups of 40, let's work in groups of 10. And that way, let's zoom in there and see what that means. So you can see these are all the manholes, but not all of them are near a pump station. And so when we click this on and off, you can see that there's several manholes that we decided to skip. So we were tracking which ones are done. We know exactly where they're done, and we can do the other ones later. But instead of sweeping through and doing twice as many inspections, we encourage the crews to do what we call smart selection and work with microclusters. Now, when we finished that project, everybody agreed upon it. The good news was, as we did that, the average inspection score for a manhole is 45. You know, the higher the number, the worse the score. And what we were able to do to show them is, as we select everything in this area, by doing the smart selection, our average score jumps up to a 64. So our smart selection showed significant savings in cost and time. And so we were able to show the results of that decision. And as we go into this area, remember how I encouraged them to look at St. Augustine Beach and put funding there? Let's hop up there and we'll grab these ones in St. Augustine Beach. The average score for that, and here's a little hint, it's going to be 69, or even rounding it to 70. So not only did it equate to that, but it came up with worse scores than were there. So moving 1/3 of the funding to this area was a business decision that paid off. And then we can simply rehab them. And as we rehab them, you can see the average cost of these repairs is $4,111. So instead of guessing, I could just use this number, and this tracks it as it goes. So that's a big deal for us. And again, we're in that point of that transition. And let me just minimize some stuff. Whoops. What you can't see is what I'm doing on the other screen. And there we go. And so that, again, that was our live demo. You were hitting our servers with our logins, and this is how easily we share this information. And I wanted to follow up on a few key points that we've done since then. You know, we are building on those tools. We all have been working with the American Water Infrastructure Act, which identifies the risk. And so we use those same tools to look at our water mains and come up with a probability of failure for our water mains to get a generalized risk, so that we're basing that on information that is required for us to meet the compliance of that act. That's a big deal within a lot of management areas, and there's some questions there that may be challenging to answer. So you certainly can consider this one way that you could have met that if you had the ability to run the probability of failure. And you know, another one for us is we're managing and measuring the utilities management. So effective utility management and key performance indicators. So we're tying these annual goals. You know, we set our goals and our objectives of the utility on how we operate, our annual goals, so how many tank cleanings we'll do, how many lift station maintenance tasks we'll do. And then we measure them and publish them. And this is a project we're still in the middle of, so there's no demo. But certainly we can show charts and trends for whether we're meeting our annual goals. And more analytics to help us look at our workflows, and things that we couldn't perceive are showing up in the data. And so with that, you know, I'm going to have some questions at the end, but at St. Johns County Utility, we are high growth, 14th nationally. Consolidation, you know, we've taken over 6 utilities in the last 11 years, and that number will continue to grow. So our growth rate of doubling in the next 15 years could be significantly higher. We do have infrastructure past its lifespan. Hurricane Matthew gave us the highest damage in the state, and Hurricane Irma, 10 months later, at the end of day 1, we were 90% without power. At the end of day 5, we were still 10% without power. So how you operate a sewer utility without power requires field mobility and logistics. And we're very proud of that. So Krista, thank you for the opportunity. Love to have the questions and the conversation and the dialogue with the other utilities. And I think we have time for questions.
We do have time for questions, and we still have some rolling in. We'll give them just a second to get their questions in. All right, questions and then links where you can find webinar recordings and stay connected with the Esri Water team. All right, Sam, I hope you're ready. We've got a bunch coming in. Let's start with something, hopefully that's not too difficult. Several of the attendees are asking, how much of this data do you share publicly, or do you not share any of it?
And I'll try and provide brief answers, and people can post further questions for me. the slide has my email, or LinkedIn, which I'm not as good at. Publicly, we can't provide the infrastructure to them. I could very easily turn an application out that shows where we're working now with hotspots, but we don't really have the time to do that. But it is interesting to see. We do share, if we're doing smoke testing, our water quality reports. We try and be as transparent as we can while still protecting the infrastructure design from the public. But we do share that with our contractors and our crews.
Yeah, I'm sure that makes the work flow a lot more efficient too. I've talked to some of our customers that are doing similar workflows where they're sharing it with their contractors, and it's really shortened the time it takes to get the data and get the project completed.
Very significantly. And as a utility, we pay them to get our data and rebuild it on their system, so they're looking at what we have. And this is much more efficient to just look at the same thing.
Yeah, it's really nice. Another question we have is about your assets, and you've got them in your GIS. Locations important. Are you having any challenges with assets that are very close to each other? How is that handled?
That's a good one. The design of ours is about 10 years. So again, we have footprints for our treatment plants, and we might have a dozen related feature tables for each building. And so pumps, blowers, electrical panels, motors, SCADA, emergency showers. We also, each lift station is just a point with a wet well, a pump, another pump, a motor, electrical panel, SCADA, and antenna. So it gets pretty complex. We've started exploring, loved what I saw at the conference with the BIM integration and Pro. And we started exploring in representing our key features as points. Those related tables, tying them to a point for the pumps and the blowers. A blower, a high-speed pump blower at our treatment plant, we have, you walk in there and there's 6 of them, and it's $1 million worth of stuff. And it's just 6 blowers. And so knowing where those are and where your costs are become really important. So yes, they get pretty clustered, but they're fairly spread out until you get to our facility sites. But we're working on it because we know people want to see more.
Always more.
Yep.
Okay, next question is about the utility network. Is this something that you've looked at or considered moving into? You're pretty progressive. You've shown us a lot of stuff today. What does that look like for you?
So the Esri utility network model, have I got that one right?
Yeah, is this a loaded question?
I've heard tremendous things about it. And I think it's the direction the utilities need to go for the future, because you need to build tools to automate. We're basically automating information, like everything else we automate. I would love to learn from someone else on that one. I have a foundation of data that everything is built upon. And so when I do change that foundation in the next few years, it's going to require updating the other stuff. Not terrible. I think that's pretty neat, but I wanted to complete my Esri patterns of use to make sure we were really tying into how management makes decisions instead of pushing resources into rebuilding our data model.
Yeah, and that's actually really good, because once you get your system in and you get your staff using it, I think it'll be an easier transition. And for the part of the question about the CMMS system, I know that CityWorks is a platinum partner with Esri. They work very closely with us. So there is a plan that as time goes by, the utility network's going to be used more often. We're going to start seeing some real business value testimonials from our customers, as well as our partners who are really helping to push that development and migration and making it easier for all of you to make that transition to the utility network. So stay tuned. If you're not connected with the water team, join us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Make sure you're following our Esri Water handle as well as Esri staff. I know I have my own handle, so we're going to try to get as much information out to you about the utility network as we can. Sorry for stealing your time, Tom.
No, not a problem. We have editing standards and techniques. We use your task attribute assistant, our task manager attribute assistant, and data reviewer. So we have SOPs and workflows already in place that my staff will be jealous of anyone that gets the utility model up and going, because they love what it can do. But again, we're still staked in a 5-year plan of building on that executive and operational awareness, and then we'll revisit some of the tools by then.
Well, talking about your staff, we did have several questions about that transition. You mentioned using dashboards and trying to take these baby steps to get staff used to the technology. Some of the questions that are coming in are more about training and exposure. Are there steps that you take to train or to get that buy-in? Are there champions in each division that help you to facilitate the transition to the technology?
The Cityworks system basically is it looks at a process and helps people with that. So we stay on top of that very close, and we try and constantly train them or revisit or tune it up. They've actually taken the training for that on themselves to show their crews. They treat it like a tool now. They treat it like they treat a truck, or they treat the wrench or some of their better tools that they have, the more electronic-based tools. For the dashboard, the newer ones, there is a transition period, and the smart boards are helping us again put that decision-making tool in front of the decision-making process. But getting people to learn to utilize a tool they've never had or switch from desktop to pro is trickier, and so we're just constantly working on that transition for people.
Yeah, and how's the management team like the dashboards? Are they engaging with it, that you're getting positive response?
Yeah, they are. The thing with it is we want to put it in their hands. And so that's tricky, because the first you either send them to training for days, or you have a project that they come to see you on and you walk them through it. We had a slide without any graphics called utility management. And again, that's where they wanted to look at how they AWWA, Standard for Effective Utility Management. What are your objectives? Should you be performing maintenance on a lift station 6 months, 12 months? Do you do tank inspections 1 month? How many grease traps do you inspect? And so they have all these metrics, and they met outside of us to see them, but they already had established us as the way of, set a goal and then measure, are you meeting the goal? And so we are absolutely. They came to beating on our door, knocking it down in order to have ways of measuring goals. And we're excited about that. That one takes some time, because that is a huge cultural shift.
It really is. And I know we're out of time. Tom, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your webinar presentation and demonstration. You have so much to offer our community and share. I hope everyone still on the call also found it useful and exciting. Thank you for joining today. Thank you, Tom, again for presenting. Please join us next year for our webinar series. We will post webinar announcements on our meetup group and in GeoNet. So please connect with us for the latest and greatest. Oh, and a little heads up, our industry newsletter should be coming out this week or early next week. So if you're not getting Esri news for water, go on to our website and try to sign up for that. And if you are signed up already, you should be getting it soon. Thanks, Tom. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the year.
And thank you, Krista. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. We love the conversation.